In a land where the sun rose over emerald forests and the wind whispered through the branches, there existed realms so far apart that even their very nature seemed worlds apart. One realm was the home of the flower fairies, delicate beings of light and petals who thrived in fields of wildflowers and hidden meadows. The other was the domain of the gods of war, where steel clashed, and the earth trembled with the force of battle. Among the flower fairies was Lyra, a quiet, graceful spirit whose wings shimmered like dew-kissed petals at dawn. She was entrusted with the care of the wildest blooms, the ones that grew in the most secret corners of the world. Lyra's heart was pure, her spirit as gentle as the breeze, but there was a restlessness in her, a longing to understand the forces of destruction that stirred in the world beyond her sanctuary. She had never known war, nor the gods who governed it, but something within her was drawn to it. Far from the realm of flowers and peace, in the land of gods, stood Ares, the god of war. Towering, fierce, and bound by the codes of conflict, Ares had known only the sound of clashing swords and the cries of soldiers. His heart was as tempered as his blade, forged in the fire of 1,000 battles. He was a protector of the realm, but also a harbinger of chaos. His presence could silence armies with fear, and his wrath could level mountains. Their worlds were meant to remain separate, untouched by one another, until the day when fate, as it often does, intervened. The meeting. It began with a whisper on the wind, a tremor in the air, that disturbed the calm of the meadow where Lyra lived. She had been tending to a patch of wild violets when she felt the earth tremble beneath her feet. At first, she thought it was an earthquake, but the rumble was different. It felt like a storm. Drawn by the feeling, she followed the vibrations through the forest, until she came upon a clearing where the very sky seemed to crack with thunder. And there, in the center of the clearing, stood a figure cloaked in shadow, his armor glistening with the sheen of blood and battle. His eyes, bright like molten steel, met hers. Ares stood still, as if he had felt her presence the moment she entered the clearing. His sharp gaze softened for the briefest of moments, as if he were seeing something he hadn't expected. "You are not afraid?" he asked, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. Lyra hesitated, sensing the tension in the air, but her heart did not falter. "Why should I be afraid? You are not the storm, only a part of it." Ares blinked, surprised by her calmness. Most mortals would have fled at the sight of him, the god of destruction, but here was a delicate creature of wings and flowers, standing before him with the kind of peace he had not known in centuries. "I am Ares, god of war," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his name. "I am Lyra," she replied softly, "a keeper of the flowers." For a long moment, they simply stood there, the wind rustling around them, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Ares felt a strange stirring in his chest, a flutter, almost like a seed stirring in the soil. "Tell me, Lyra," he asked, his voice quieter now, "why do you remain so calm in the face of violence?" Lyra smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "Because I have seen the beauty that can bloom even in the harshest of storms. The rain nourishes, the wind carries seeds, and after the battle, life always returns. Even war cannot destroy everything." Ares stared at her, as if trying to understand her words. He had never known such certainty. To him, the world was defined by victory and defeat, by the blood that stained the earth. Yet, here was this fragile creature, speaking of something entirely different, something that, in all his years, he had never truly considered. The bond. Days turned into weeks, and Ares found himself returning to the clearing. He did not know why, but he could not stay away. Lyra was a balm to the wounds his soul bore. Her presence was soothing in a way that no victory or conquest had ever been. In her presence, the violence inside him quieted. In turn, Lyra found herself drawn to Ares, not because of his power or his rage, but because of the sorrow that lingered beneath his armor. He was a god who had known only destruction, yet there was something fragile about him, like a storm that could no longer remember the sun. And she, with her gentle touch, was the light he needed to find his way back to himself. They spoke often, though their conversations were always quiet, the way two people might share secrets when the world around them was too loud to bear. Lyra would tell him of the flowers she nurtured, of the quiet peace she found in their growth. Ares, in turn, spoke of the battles he had fought, of the gods he had known, and the endless wars that had made him who he was. And then, one day, Lyra took Ares to a meadow, where the first blooms of spring were beginning to unfurl. She knelt before a delicate white flower, its petals trembling in the morning breeze. "See," she said softly, "this flower was once a seed buried in the earth. It could have been crushed by the weight of the world, but it found its way to the surface. Life does not give up so easily." Ares knelt beside her, watching the flower sway. For the first time in his existence, he felt a stir of hope. The seeds of change, planted long ago, were beginning to sprout in his heart. The choice. As the seasons changed, so did they. Lyra's heart began to grow heavy with an awareness she had never felt before. She had come to love Ares, not as a god of war, but as a soul in need of healing, a soul she longed to protect. But their worlds were different, and the bond they shared was fragile. What would happen if the gods of war called him back to battle? What would happen if the storms returned? One evening, as the moon rose high in the sky, casting silver light over the meadow, Lyra spoke the words that had been weighing on her heart. "Ares," she said, "our worlds are so different. I fear what will become of us. Will you be forced to return to your realm, to fight once more?" Ares turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I have always known war. It is my nature. But in you, I have known peace. I have seen the beauty of life, not just the clash of steel. I have seen what lies beyond the battle." Lyra's heart ached at his words. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. But the bond they shared was real, and though it was fragile, it was worth protecting. In the end, they chose to walk together, side by side, a god of war and a keeper of flowers. Though the storms would come, and the winds would howl, they would find their way through the chaos together. For even in the heart of war, a flower could bloom, and even in the midst of destruction, there was always room for love.